In this part of the video, I want to talk about the factors that lead to higher internal validity and the factors that lead to higher external validity. I've already talked about how experiments tend to be higher in internal validity and how non-experiments tend to be higher in external validity, but now I just want to talk about the factors that lead to higher internal validity in general, regardless of what type of study is being done, and also the factors that lead to higher external validity in general, regardless of what type of study is being done. The two factors that lead to higher internal validity are random assignment and control. We've already talked about why random assignment and control are needed to confidently draw a cause and effect conclusion. We talked about that way back at the beginning of the semester when we first started to talk about experiments. When you do an experiment and you have random assignment to groups and you also control the environment and control the situation, you're confident that there are no important differences between the two groups of people you're comparing other than your manipulation, which might be temperature or whatever you're testing. And that's why you can confidently draw a cause and effect conclusion in an experiment. So if I randomly assign my participants to two groups, I put one group in a cold room and one group in a hot room, then I test the two groups at the same time of day. I make sure that they have the same caffeine intake. I make sure that they're both in a soundproof room, and so on. Then I'm confident that the only important difference between these two groups is the temperature of the room. And if one group does significantly better than the other, I'm confident that temperature is what caused that to happen, because what else could it be, right? It can't be the time of day. I tested them at the same time of day. It can't be the noise of the room that caused one group to do better than the other, because I ensured that they're tested at the same noise level. It can't be caffeine intake, because I've ensured that they have equal caffeine intake. So that's why random assignment and control lead to higher internal validity. Let's talk about the factors that lead to higher external validity. So first of all, less control leads to higher external validity. So if you have a study in which you don't control the environment and you just let things unfold as they would naturally, you have higher external validity because you'll be more confident in drawing conclusions about the real world, where things actually are a little bit more messy. And also, a more realistic setting would give you higher external validity. And I think the first two really go hand in hand. They're really just two ways of saying the same thing: less control in a more realistic setting. So now imagine that you want to observe people in a restaurant. You want to observe diners in a restaurant, and you decide to do some naturalistic observation. And imagine you go to TGI Fridays on a Thursday night, and you observe the diners just as they're eating for maybe a couple of hours. Well, since you're collecting data in a real-life situation, you're probably going to be able to make some generalizations to other similar real-world locations. You're probably going to be able to draw conclusions about what would happen at TGI Fridays on some other nights of the week, maybe Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday, and not just Thursday, which is what you observed. So you could probably have some external validity in that sense, and you're probably also going to be able to draw confident conclusions about what would happen at other TGI Fridays locations, not just the location that you observed, because the other locations are probably tend to be fairly similar. So if you saw a certain behavior at your TGI Fridays, it's likely to happen at other ones that you haven't observed. Also, you're probably going to be able to make some confident conclusions about other similar restaurant chains like Applebee's or Chili's. So what I'm getting at here is, if you've done that study that I just described, you've observed behavior at one time of day or at one time with one group of diners and at one location, one restaurant chain. But your conclusions are going to go beyond that time and place and group of people, so you have high external validity. Basically, if you observe people in one realistic location, you can probably draw some conclusions about other similar realistic locations. And that's why a realistic setting helps you get higher external validity. Now, a more representative sample also leads to higher external validity. We'll talk more about what a representative sample is in the next topic of survey research, but I'll give a brief description now. So when a researcher is doing a study, the researcher is often trying to learn something about a category of people, like men, women, college students, high school students, or something like that. And the category that the researcher wants to learn about is called a population of individuals. And when a researcher is studying a really big population, like men, women, or college students, the researcher can't collect data from every member of the population. So what the researcher does instead is the researcher selects a sample of population members, which is a selected group of population members who actually participate. And then the researcher uses the data from the sample to draw conclusions about the bigger population. So if I survey 50 college students and I draw a conclusion about all college students in general, I've used a sample to draw a conclusion about a bigger population. And a representative sample is basically a high-quality sample. It's an accurate sample. And a representative sample has a balanced variety of population members. It has the right number of each type of person. And a representative sample gives a researcher a clear or fairly clear snapshot of the bigger population, even though the entire population wasn't observed. And when you collect data from a representative sample, it allows you to draw inferences about not only the sample, but also the population members outside of the sample. And that means that a representative sample is giving you external validity, because if you can draw conclusions about unobserved population members, you have external validity, right? Because the definition of external validity is the ability to draw conclusions beyond the time, place, and people of your study. And like I just said, a representative sample gives you that ability. So that's it for this topic. In the next video, we'll begin the topic of survey research.